Hello, and welcome to The Void, where I speak and probably nobody listens. I hope you're all having a good day, week, month, hour, minute. Today, I wanted to hop on and talk about love. This has been a bit of a big journey for me, actually, recently. I think I said a couple of episodes ago that I'm not recently, but like out of a pretty big relationship, and it's been a bit of a journey. Getting over that. So I just wanted to hop on here and sort of talk about what my stance on love is, what my opinions are on like what love can be, and just talk about what how we as a society engage with love and how maybe that could and for some people should change. So to start with, I want to just talk about the way in which people learn about love before they have loved. And by that I mean like, people going through like their adolescence and kids growing up and how these things have an effect on what we expect when we fall in love. I think that most of us will agree that relationships, I think most of us would agree that standard relationships involve two people, and that in and of itself I find quite interesting. However, let's carry on with like what we think is normal, what I'm going to like propose as the normal. So we have two people, and I think typically in society today, even today, I think some people might disagree with me on this, but it's usually portrayed as a man and a woman, a heteronormative relationship. That is changing, and I wonder whether my opinion on that is because I exist in a social circle that means that I'm exposed to, non-heteronormative relationships a bit more than the average person. But I think that most people would agree that it doesn't have to just be, standard male-female relationships, and these things are in flux, and gender is a spectrum, and how heavily you identify on either side of that, or any side of that, however you choose to exist, is all okay and cool, and really has no effect on the wider conversation that we're going to talk about here. So if I do, specify genders or anything like that during this whole thing, just know that it's not specific, and it's more to do with illustrating a point about feeling an emotion towards people and what that means. So why do we see these things as, two people? And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's useful for a governing body for us to be in pairs. But I think I would rather talk about the way that media portrays these things to us, because I think that has such a huge effect on us when we're children. Like just think about any movie that you've seen, especially when you're a kid, like there's usually some sort of love interest. At least, you think about like Disney films. I struggle to think of one that doesn't have some sort of love interest. Moana? Maybe Moana. But I haven't seen it in a long time. I could be really, really gravely mistaken. But like you think of most like standard Disney films, you have your Aladdins, your Sleeping Beauties, your Beauty and the Beasts, even like your Frozens and your Tangleds and Princess and the Frog. Like there's a love interest. That's kind of what it's about. And watching those things, you get an idea of like, you pick up on like what is cool and what is not cool, and how these things sort of should go. Kids are picking up on these things always, and they always say to parents, don't they? They're like, how you argue in front of your kids is really, really important, because they will pick up on everything that you do, and likely they will argue in the same way. And that's something that I've noticed as well as I've gotten older. Like when I hear my parents arguing, my parents are great, but if I ever hear them arguing or having disputes, I'll sort of see like hints of like myself in it, and it's subconscious. It's completely subconscious. I'm not choosing to argue like them, though I probably would. I think they argue very healthily to an extent. But you see it, kids pick up on it. And then, you grow up a little bit and you go to school, and like I have a lot of views on the schooling system and what it should and shouldn't do. And maybe I'll do a whole separate episode on that. But, I don't know if you can hear that, but that's my stomach. You go to, like, kids go to school and they learn about all sorts. But I think that for me, primarily, school is it's a playground in which you figure out how to socialize. And I think it's massively important. And I think that what happens at school will form the adult that you grow up to be. It's very rare that you see people, like you hear about people who like commit crimes and stuff like that, where there's been nothing that would have hinted at that becoming a possibility later on in life during their school years. They're so formative. And, if I think about my school experience, and I think mine was fairly good, considering that, I was one of like maybe 3 non-white families in probably at least my year. Probably like, well, not many in the whole school. And there weren't many instances of like crazy racism or anything like that. For all intents and purposes, it was quite good. But there was still lots of problems, and I think about the people that have ended up causing a bit of trouble since then, and it's it's usually like the way that they've behaved in school is indicative of what will come immediately after. And linking this back to the whole love thing, I think that it's important to notice like what we see in school and what we see our friends doing, what we see our peers doing is kind of what we expect ourselves to do. And you go to high school specifically, like, primary school it's great. You two-time on people and you just tell them in the playground and stuff. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's brilliant that kids do that. I specifically remember being told that I was being two-timed once. And I just felt so grateful to have a girlfriend at the time. I think I was like 7 or something. I was so grateful to have a girlfriend that I just said, okay, cool, I'm fine with that if he's all right with that. And I wasn't fine with it, but I just didn't want to lose my social standing. Anyway, agreeing to the situation only made my social standing worse. But it was primary school, so it didn't matter. So high school, like, if you think about, what your first instances of like seeing anybody be romantic with somebody at high school, where these things become like semi-serious, like I still know people who like they're married now from high school, like they've been together since year 8, married now, and that's that. They had one romantic experience, and now that's it, and that's kind of the goal, I guess. That'd be lovely, wouldn't it? But myself, and I imagine anybody listening to this has probably not been so lucky, because why would you need to watch a video on love if the only experience of love has been successful? I don't know. Maybe just to learn, and if that's you, welcome. I appreciate you. But like, if you think about like what you saw, like at least for myself, it was my friends, and it was about, oh, we went out last night. We were out at skate park. Oh, we kissed, we snogged for like 5 minutes. Oh, it was tongues this, it was tongues that. It was all about physical escalation. And it was always about somebody being like yours, or you choosing not to commit. So it was either like you're with this person and then that was it. Like, you're linked to this person, like yours and this person's social standing are intricately linked for the whole time that you're together. Or, you know, you get with someone and then you're aloof and you leave it, and it's like, you know, it's one or the other. You know, you either are with someone or you're not with someone, or like you're trying to get some sort of like physical action out of the person, and you're always trying to affect other people. I find that interesting in the way that, like, my experience as a guy and having my friends talk about that sort of stuff, and seeing how they interacted with women specifically. I don't think there was anybody openly gay at my school. There wasn't. And seeing those interactions, and also sort of seeing how perhaps I subconsciously acted around women, at least like the first couple of interactions that I had, of like what I would need to deem it successful. You know, it was about the kissing, it was about the touching, it was about the physical affirmation that I'm with this person, if that makes sense. Not necessarily about like the what is said. And I would say I was quite an emotionally open person back then. You know, I would allow myself to feel stuff, and I think that was actually relatively rare, at least in my social circle. So it's easy to see, right? Everybody's like home experience is different, and that definitely has an effect on how people interact with like romance later on in life. And you know, everybody has like a slightly different experience of like what they see in movies, etc. But I think that widely the narrative around love is very, very consistent in media, in that the aim should be to meet someone, fall in love with someone, have babies with someone, get married to that person, die with that person. You know, those, you know, the middle 2 or 3 there can probably be switched around, but kids, marriage, die together is kind of the goal, right? I think that we can probably agree on that. And I mean that in terms of like what media is telling us, not my opinion, what media is telling us. And then obviously school, you see and you learn about how you and your friends are gonna love, and like, and that's kind of like your playground to do what you see, if that makes sense, to take the things that you've seen and implement them into practice and see how you do that. And I think that's really important. The social skill of flirting, I'll maybe do a whole video on that, on the social skill of flirting and why I think it's an important thing to flex regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not, because it's a skill that we need as humans, and we shouldn't just let it go because we're with someone. I'm not saying cheat on anybody, but like, I think that, you know, keeping the skill sharp is important. Moving on from like the early life stuff, I want to talk about like your first love, like, you know, what your first love is and what it can be, and I'll talk about my experience. But it's just, for me, it was like all consuming. Couldn't feel anything else. All I could feel was love for this person. And I'd liked people before and felt kind of that way of like not being able to get people out of my head. And, you know, listening to songs on repeat because they would remind me of them, and constant texting and whatnot. Like I've been there. That was what I had felt. But then, you know, you fall in love with someone and it's completely different. Completely different to that. It's the same, but it's on like a whole different level of like concern for this person, of wanting to be around this person. And I think that, you know, my first instance of loving someone, I burnt the candle a bit too bright, I think. You know, I'd be the first to say that my first relationship was not perfect, really not perfect, and my behavior was not perfect within that relationship, and the way that we communicated with each other was not perfect. But like, you ask me, it was love. I'm not sure she would say the same. But like, you fall in love and it's just like, oh God, I want to be around this person all the time, and you want to do everything with this person, and it's like sharing, like getting used to having somebody to share your life with is like a really special thing, I think. I just remember feeling, maybe this is like a bit of a me thing, but like the way that it ended, I was going through some pretty tough family stuff, and had to leave like an event like a couple of days early, and she was supposed to be coming up to see me after a while, and I kept on being like, oh, I'd love for you to come up and see me, because I was living in Leeds and she was in London. It was like the school holidays, like from college, and she was like, oh yeah, one day I'll book it, and then she just called me one day and was like, oh, it's over. Anyway, it turned out she'd like stayed at some guy's house, and then they were together, and like I spent the next like 9 months just like either trying to get her back or crying with my best friend at the time, Andy. We would get like drinks on a Friday. I remember it was like a bottle of white wine, and I'd get halfway and just be like, oh, why does she love me? And then we'd go to a club before 10 so that we could get in early, and then mind sweep for the rest of the night because we were too poor to buy drinks. Wild times. So yeah, I was, either trying to get her back, doing that, or sleeping with her friends. And I would say that probably all of those things, except the crying specifically, are probably not good things to do. But we learn, we're navigating the whole thing and transitioning it back, moving on from, first love, that all-encompassing, fire burning, first heartbreaks. I think that they teach us a lot about love. And like, I think that's maybe where this possessiveness was instilled in me, at least, and I think it is for most people, is that like at the point that somebody first says I can't be with you anymore, the point that like the first time that somebody breaks your heart after you've loved them and felt this feeling that we've just talked about, I think like that for me was the point at which I was like, I thought that this person was for me. I thought this was mine. Like I thought that we were together. I thought it was me and her. And I think that's a difficult thing to come to terms with the first time. And the way that you deal with that will inform how everything else afterwards happens, in terms of how you deal with getting out of that relationship, how long you give yourself to get into your next relationship, and the way in which, if that relationship ends, the way in which you deal with the end of that one. Because you can see a cycle, and I see cycles in myself of like how I've ended up dealing with my my recent breakup versus before, and things are definitely different, but things are also kind of similar. So yeah, like that's how you end up with like serial daters, because some people are like, oh no, I need to be with someone, and they crave the companionship and they go for that. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's absolutely fine. But it's like, sometimes people need time to process, and some people will take time. I think that like the widely said thing is that it's like half the time you were with someone to get over them. I'm not sure how much stock I put in that, but timeline wise, that kind of makes sense for where I'm at. And yeah, like the heartbreak process, the way in which you deal with the fallout from your first heartbreak, because it's something that you've never experienced before. The way that you deal with that fallout, I think, shapes how the rest of your life is, like romantically at least, going to play out. For me, it came down to feeling that sort of betrayal. And even though, it's never actually been said that she cheated on me, but I struggle to see how you stayed at his house and then you were in a relationship 2 weeks later and nothing happened. And if it didn't, at the very least, I was being emotionally cheated on, and I think that is worse. So that's really forming everything. And kind of bringing it into like my point, right? Like my big point is talking about like love in like modern society and how that is kind of changing. I'm a serial monogamist, and I think I probably will be for the rest of my days because of how things have played out. But I do see a point and a case for non-monogamy and the many forms in which that can take. So yeah, I do see the point, like a case for non-monogamy and the forms in which that can take, and I think that it can be quite freeing. I say this and I speak from kind of experience. Like I was with someone recently who was quite strictly not monogamous, and they sort of like conformed to what I needed because that's like that was the way in which the relationship was heading. However, it then ended, and then we sort of started again. And I've sort of gotten to a point now because of like the way in which, because we were talking about opening up the relationship. I'd said like I didn't, if this is something that they feel like they want, I was happy to at least entertain the idea of opening it up. And mainly my problem was whether or not I felt like I could engage with it rather than just allowing this person to be with other people, I suppose is my point. And like eventually we're not together now, but it sort of sprouted into this thing, and like me feeling this different type of loving someone, where like the feeling was kind of the same, but it wasn't like oppressive or possessive or particularly intrusive. I would just notice that like we would be at social events, and they would be here, and that would make me feel happy. Or like I would see them talking to somebody else, and I'd be like, I bet that conversation's great. Maybe I'll join it, maybe I won't. But the fact that they are here and they're having a good time in the same space as me is fabulous. And I don't feel any pressure to like be with this person, and I don't feel any pressure for them to only be with me. I don't think I want a relationship with this person. But I think that I love them. And it's been a process figuring that out, because I'd been obviously a serial monogamist. And like this person is like openly, getting with other people. And our situation is still continuing, and that's fine with me. Surprisingly fine. I think if you had asked me months ago, years ago, I'd be like, no, never, that's not a thing. But like, I'm experiencing love in a new way here, and it's freeing almost to not feel like the stakes kind of evaporate when you're already open to the fact that somebody might be with someone else. The only thing you have to worry about is whether or not you can or can't be with them. Them being with someone else doesn't have to be a betrayal. Sort of eliminates a worry. And similarly, it's freeing in a sense of like, you kind of feel open to all kinds of other feelings. You don't feel like you can't feel anything for anybody else because you've agreed to feel something for someone. It sort of just opens up this whole thing, and I think it's really nice. And I don't think it's like a thing that I want like in the long run, but I think that just knowing that I can feel that, and that's not to say everybody can, but just knowing that I can feel that sparked a conversation in my head of like, okay, how much of this is conditioning by society? Well then, yeah, like how much of this is conditioning by society, and how much is just how I feel? Like I said earlier, I think that the like media and my environment had told me up until very recently that being with one person was really the only way to romantically love, and anything else was kind of obscure and frowned upon, like being with multiple people and like, like polyamory or polygamy or something like that. Like it's all like frowned upon almost, and that's becoming less and less of a thing. But at the same time, like, I just think having an open mind of thinking, I can think for myself here and decide whether or not I want to or can love in X way, is really the only way to figure out what you are or aren't okay with. Speaking personally, I think that maybe I could exist within something that isn't specifically quote unquote monogamous, but I don't think that that's what I want. I think I want to share my life with one person. That's at least where I'm at right now. Maybe this won't age well. Where I'm at right now, though, I think I would like to find someone and fall for them and choose to be together. I think I would like to hold on to this feeling of it not being possessive, of like, things being okay, of like, if this person turns around and says they want to be with someone else, that's also cool. People don't stop feeling things just because they've been because they are in a relationship. That's never an expectation. And I think that kind of being chill with that is an important step for me, at least. I would like to hold on to that, but I think I would like to be with someone and just one person. It's kind of my goal. That's kind of what I see for myself long term. So yeah. I suppose the message of this little video, of this video, is to just listen to yourself. Be aware of how you ended up emotionally where you are, what your environment has told you and taught you about how you should or shouldn't love, and be open to the idea of perhaps teaching yourself about how you can or can't love. I think that it's in flux, and I think the fact that I have a cat here and I love her with all my heart in a completely different way, like in almost like a child sense. I feel a sense of duty, and similar with like parents, of like the love that they feel for their kids is completely different from the love they feel for their partner or their spouse. And I think that in that same way, the love in which you feel for your spouse can also be different and varied, and not necessarily pin you into what society is deemed as okay. I think as long as your communication is right, your relationship can largely be whatever you want it to be, as long as it is based around that fundamental love. That's kind of, where I'm at. It can kind of be whatever we want it to be. It doesn't need to be what the world has told us it has to be. It just has to be something that fulfills us both. Something that we're both okay with, that serves us both, and that we believe has, longevity. That's kind of my criteria. Not necessarily like you have to be my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my partner or whatever. It can just be, I'm with this person. We are together. And what that means for us is between us, not everybody else. And, maybe we do use labels because that's a way that people understand. But also maybe we talk to them and say, this is our situation. This is why we do it. And the air is fresh. This is why we do it. And maybe we can get the people of the world at large to also feel this way. And I think that people will be much happier in their relationships if they communicate about what exactly it is they want and what they really want, not just what they have been told they want, and see whether or not the other person is available for it. Let me know if you catch my drift. I'd love to hear from people and discuss it. I've been Ashley. This is The Void, in which I speak and probably nobody listens. I hope you have a great day, week, month, second, minute. I'll catch you in the next one. Someone who really knows me.
someone who when they hold me